This is basically an environmental and social injustice. This is the case against Poseidon Huntington Beach presented by Oakview Comunidad and Azul. Next slide, please. So we view Poseidon as an environmental injustice. We have concerns about the further industrialization of our coast, the access to the regional water board and staff. Poseidon, as the polluter, has had almost unlimited access while the public has had limited access. Virtual board meetings require participants to have access to costly broadband internet and newer technology that some community members may not have. Next slide, please. We do have concerns about environmental racism. This boondoggle undeniably hurts low-income communities of color disproportionately by raising their water rates. Not only is this project not carbon neutral, the offsets that Poseidon is interested in procuring would be through technologies that hurt marginalized communities elsewhere in California, other states, and even in other countries. So a vote for Poseidon is a vote for environmental destruction and suffering here and abroad. And the more energy that's consumed by an energy-intensive desalination plant, the more greenhouse gases are emitted and the worse climate change gets. Next slide. Basically, this does not take into account the requirement to reduce water usage by 2/3 by 2030. So you have Assembly Bill 1668 and Senate Bill 606, which require Californians to reduce water usage to 50 gallons per day by 2030. The average ratepayer in California currently uses approximately 150 gallons per day. They're quite over. So really, this gets to the need, which people have already stated. If Poseidon is approved, the ratepayers are going to be stuck holding the bag with the higher priced water regardless. And our low income families can't save money enough through reductions. They already have to cut as much as they're able to. Next slide. And
this is Brett Cordy. I'm an attorney with UC Irvine's Environmental Law Clinic. I just want to note that it's possible Andrea is also under my name. If there's two of me, maybe that's where she is. I shared her a link for convenience sake a little bit ago. So I'll move on. So contrary to Poseidon's assertions, before you for consideration today and in the coming weeks is every part of the regional board's permitting of Poseidon's project. You have, of course, not made any decisions on Poseidon's project yet. And this is the public's only opportunity to comment on the staff report, which goes well beyond mitigation or the human right to water. There are many flaws with the project and the tentative order, and I'd like to focus on two of those flaws. Staff's faulty analysis of the need for Poseidon's water and the inadequate consideration of the human right to water impacts of the project. These two issues are related, and we must be able to talk about them together. When it comes to need, ask yourselves, who is it that actually needs the water Poseidon wants to produce? First of all, the water suppliers don't need 56,000 acre-feet per year.
So, Mr. Court, this relates to need again. We really need to focus on mitigation, which is the scope of what we have at hand. So if you could get to that part of your presentation, that would be very helpful.
Thank you, Chair Peterson. I'd like to note that the human right to water was also revised in the tentative order, so we need to be able to talk about that.
Okay, so let's keep it to the human right to water, and let's also keep it to the mitigation if possible.
So MoDOC's Urban Water Management Plan was just updated draft at the beginning of April, so there's no way we could have talked about it in our comments before this. But I'll move on to the ratepayer issue, because ratepayers, and particularly low-income environmental justice communities, don't need Poseidon's water. Not when every other option is more cost-effective and less harmful to the environment. Ratepayers don't need to see their water bills increase, and Poseidon's water is 4 times more expensive than the water it will replace. UCLA Luskin Center's study shows that Poseidon will raise water rates. The Carlsbad plant shows that Poseidon will raise water rates, and your own staff recognizes that Poseidon's project will raise water rates in the staff report. Your staff is telling you that there are no elements of the human right to water statute that are relevant to your consideration of Poseidon. But your human right to water resolution specifically commits to doing a human right to water analysis on the discharge permits. The tentative order before you once again ignores the regional board's responsibility to conduct a thorough human right to water analysis of the impacts of granting Poseidon's permit, particularly on affordability. So again, who is it that needs the water? Only Poseidon and its investors. Your determination regarding the identified need cannot be based on that. Next slide, please. Which brings me back to the issue of access. Poseidon's audacity and frankly arrogance throughout this process is insulting to the public. Poseidon has meddled in agency staff operations. What you see on your screen are just 2 examples that were uncovered by PRA requests. And Poseidon is trying to present its own alternative to your staff's discharge prohibition as if that is entitled to the same deference. As members of this distinguished board, you've been put in an awful situation by Poseidon and by politicians who are pushing for this project outside of the appropriate channels. It is not your fault that Secretary Blumenfeld conducted unlawful ex partes related to your decision. And it is not your fault that Poseidon is hounding your staff and pushing its own permit terms. But what you do have control over is your decision to either ignore the malfeasance and succumb to the pressure, or to take corrective action by recusing yourselves or voting against the tentative order. A key aspect of the regional board's mission is to ensure proper water resource allocation and efficient use for the benefit of present and future generations. Do you advances that mission? Don't be the board that saddles generation of Orange County ratepayers with an expensive, unnecessary, and ill-advised project that undermines the ocean plan and the human right to water. The communities of Orange County deserve better. I'd like to hand it over to Oscar Rodriguez, who's going to tell you a little bit more about those communities. Next slide, please.
So good afternoon, members of the Santa Ana Regional Water Board. My name is Oscar Rodriguez. I currently sit on the Huntington Beach Planning Commission. I'm a board member at the South Coast AQMD Environmental Justice Advisory Board. But more importantly, I'm a resident of Huntington Beach. And as Brett mentioned, the water Poseidon plans to produce will be nearly 4 times as expensive as currently imported water. This is directly tied to the human right to water. While Poseidon claims that additional cost is equivalent to buying a cup of coffee at Starbucks a month, let me tell you that there are thousands in our county that avoid paying for overpriced coffee to begin with. Oftentimes when discussing projects of this magnitude, we forget or ignore who really gets affected the most. And in this case, Santa Ana and Anaheim are 2 of the largest cities in Orange County with the highest concentration of socioeconomically disadvantaged folks. But we also have folks in Westminster, Tustin, and smaller cities where people are living paycheck to paycheck and cannot sustain the rising cost of water that Poseidon would produce. Next slide, please. One silver lining that we have is access to data from the Bud Lewis facility in Carlsbad. It's a similar facility to the one proposed in Huntington Beach. I hope you really acknowledge this data to make an informed decision. Here we see in 2016, where there was a significant increase in the cost of water, and the price continues to rise year after that. Can you guess who gets to pay for that? Of course, it's going to be the thousands of families who are already suffering from rent increases and displacement, which are happening at high rates in our county. And nobody's really talking about what we could do. Next slide, please. Here we see the effects of what COVID-19 has brought upon millions of ratepayers. Currently, there was a report that came out that water utility debt is currently topping off at $1 billion. The same families that are struggling to put food on the table and paying for rent are the same ones that will be stuck paying for water that we don't really need. When comparing, San Diego to Orange County, we have the groundwater replenishment system, one of the best systems in the world. So let's not impose another stressor on our low-income families. Next slide, please. In addition, I think it's important that we discuss funding mechanisms that Poseidon has been seeking as well. I was surprised that Poseidon submitted applications to CIDLAC in 2018 and 2019, which most of the funding typically goes to help fund housing for low-income Californians. In addition, Poseidon is seeking backing of bonds by the U.S. government, $400 million from the Metropolitan Water District, which is a state agency, and over $500 million from the Environmental Protection Agency, which is a federal agency. Poseidon is a private entity and has no position taking funds from taxpayers and ratepayers. We should be using these funds to support good-paying jobs that focus on increasing water recycling, which the Orange County Water District has done a great job. In addition to reducing water demands amongst our region, which we can do all while expanding our storage. So thank you very much. And next we have Adriana.
Next slide. So basically, Poseidon is very energy intensive. We know that it's going to use the same amount of energy as 35,000 homes every day. So when the state calls for a flex alert, we'll all be called upon to conserve, but Poseidon would have to keep operating because it's unable to use less energy. So we know that we're going to have more heat waves, more people are going to be affected by blackouts and possibly heat-related illness. The main takeaway should be, why should individual homeowners and renters be the only ones who bear the burden of having to conserve energy, while Poseidon will basically get off scot-free? Next slide. This plan is not carbon neutral. The polluter claims it would be carbon neutral by buying carbon offsets out of state and even out of the country in Ecuador. This is basically known as pay to poison. And we know that the plant is going to run on dirty gas, and those emissions would hurt people here in Orange County and around the globe. So we shouldn't give polluters a pass because they claim that purchasing carbon offsets will balance out the damage. Just because you call something green doesn't make it so. Next slide. And of course, we know that this plant is going to kill marine life. And this is going to happen with the intakes that kill marine life by sucking in the water, and then by what is discharged out with brine and other chemicals that blow back into the ocean. We have many low-income residents that fish for food, and their ability to provide sustenance for their families will be impacted. And I also want to add that the artificial reef that Poseidon is proposing in Palos Verdes as part of its mitigation efforts would be in a red zone, and this was already pointed out to you, but will also impact those who fish for sustenance off the coast. Next slide. And then finally, this just gets to the whole issue of mitigation that we've been covering. Although we still oppose the project if Poseidon is granted a permit, we support the staff recommendation to ensure that Poseidon starts mitigation the very same day they start discharging. In other words, they shouldn't receive a get out of jail free card, and the board shouldn't cater to the needs of Poseidon and its investors because they say that they may not be able to comply with mitigation from day one. Next slide. And this should go to Andrea if she's there.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So again, I think it's clear that access has been great for Poseidon and their army of lobbyists, and low-income families aren't able to hire even one lobbyist. Next slide, please. And again, financing this private entity with public money is also outrageous. And by the way, Brookfield does have the money to finance this because it's a multi-billion-dollar company. So if they wanted to finance this boondoggle, they really can't do this. Next slide, please. Conclusion, we do not need Poseidon. Poseidon could cost ratepayers $100 million a year and replace water that is much more affordable. It's the most expensive and risky option. The facts do not support the identified needs for Poseidon water, do not protect the human right to water. There are several ways the county can meet any future water needs much more affordably, storing rainwater and recycling water. It does not advance, again, their human right to water. A vote for Poseidon is a vote to inflict more harm and suffering into our communities. We are Latinos as well. We do speak for the human right to water. Again, our communities cannot take this right now, not ever. We really need to have our board deny this permit. And with that, I do need to pass it back to Brett. He has a few words and a few questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. I guess I'd just like to state an objection to the limitation of the scope of comments today, and perhaps ask if we can get clarification on the regional board's justification of limiting comments. Again, the record is still open. The regional board has not made any decisions on this project. The staff report was just issued and has not been open for public comment. The human right to water was revised. The urban water management plan draft is new. So I'm just curious about the justification for limiting scope for the rest of the speakers today.
Do you want legal counsel to weigh in on that?
Azul and Oakview have concluded their presentation, but I suspect it would be helpful for others trying to speak today.
Go ahead, Judge.
So yeah, just to clarify, the scope of the public comment is on the revisions to the tentative order, which included the human right to water and mitigation. There were no changes to the need analysis or anything on need. The public comment isn't for the staff report.
I appreciate the clarification. The objection stands.
Thank you for those for that presentation. We will move on to the Sunrise Movement, Orange County, and they have 5 minutes.
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Alejandro. I'm with the Sunrise Movement. I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak today. We are a youth-led movement here to fight against climate change and create good jobs along the way. But I would like to say that we did ask for 20 minutes and we found it disrespectful to only be offered 5 minutes, considering the fact that our generation, Gen Z, will have to deal with the full impact of this desal plant. I will be alive all 50 years of it, and my taxes will pay for it, and we'll have to pay for decommissioning the plant if it does go through. But we can go to the next slide. Our principles include that we unite with other movements to fight for change, and we aim to abolish or reimagine institutions that degrade our communities and our climate. That requires working together to win and hold power at every level of government and society, and we work with movements who share our values in transforming our country. We can go to the next slide. So as a local hub of a national organization, we rise up today to oppose the Poseidon permit on the basis of the lack of need for the project and the impact on climate change. We understand that this project would be the most energy intensive source of water for Orange County, and that there are alternatives, all of which use less energy and cost less while providing ongoing local jobs. Next slide. Our interest in affecting change now that impacts climate change both immediately and into the future. This project, even with the changes made to this permit, does the opposite. It requires long-term commitment to buy expensive water embedded with energy now that is not needed now or in the future. Even with the basic level of efficiency and reuse, water demand continues to go down, and with that, energy demand is reduced, helping climate change. Next slide. So as far as energy offsets to mitigate for Poseidon, we should not be using far away and often climate change producing options for a project that we don't need. We should also not be using our limited renewable resources on this project. With its 50-year take-or-pay deal, the project cost will impact not only our generation, but future generations. What will happen when the 50 years are up and even before? Who will own it? And as we see in San Diego, the price of water goes up by contract 5% every year and is already unaffordable for too many families. It has become even a moral question now for my generation to even have children. I can't even think about having children or them having children with tons of these projects that are leaching and sucking away at our natural resources, giving me no option but to think of my future as something that is not even, that might not even exist. Can I get the next slide? So we appreciate the time given to speak to you today. And it isn't what we usually do, but we're learning, just listening to the speakers, but we are just listening to other speakers, but we're not going away. These decisions from this public regional regulatory water board will not only impact your children and grandchildren, but will impact generations to come for a very long time. And just this entire project generally just has become like very immoral. And I honestly get very emotional just thinking that this is even something that we're considering, something that's so vaguely disgusting and corrupt, and which is not able to be mitigated, and that we're even discussing the fact that they don't want to mitigate their climate impact right away because it's not profitable. That doesn't even make sense. It's completely illogical, and it's gross to think about, and it makes me, as a 20-year resident of Orange County, disgusted with the state that we're in currently. And I'm sorry for taking this emotional route, but this is just how I feel, and this is how my generation feels. These are how young kids feel, and this is our future, and this is the future of your children and your grandchildren. So I want you all to take that in. And I know my presentation wasn't very factual and didn't have all this information, but I hope that I can at least, that you can at least walk away with knowing how this will impact some of the younger people that will have to deal with this for the rest of their lives. With that said, that's it for my comment today. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I am not seeing any hands raised from the board member for questions. So we will move on to the Next people on, so it's tribal members from the Tongva, Chumash, and Hashimen tribes. They have the floor.
Thank you. I am Lydia Ponce, and I would like to defer to the elder, one of the Tongva Chumash elders, Tina. And after Tina, you can leave that up. After Tina, Stan, if he's on the line, Stan Rodriguez. And third would be Frankie Orona, and I'll take the last bite of the apple. How many minutes do we have? Were we granted 20 minutes?
I believe you have 15 minutes.
Okay, I requested 20 because Tina was joining. There's 4 of us. Provided you haven't had tribal consultations, this still doesn't constitute formal consultation.
Thank you. Good day, relatives. My name is Tina Calderon. I am Tongva, Chumash, and Yoeme. I am also on the board of the Hachimen Tongva Land Conservancy. In our traditional Tongva territory, we hold many sites sacred from Bayona wetlands south to Bosa Chica, and our ancestral territory goes south to Newport Beach, as well as our Hachimen relatives who hold even more sacred sites from our shared territory in Long Beach on to the south beyond San Clemente. Personally, I strongly oppose Poseidon Huntington Beach location, which is just too close to our sacred site at Bolsa Chica, and as well as the act of desalinization in general. As we think about the human right to water, we must question our right to make it okay to control, manipulate, and negatively affect other beings. Just because we are physically capable of altering what our Creator has provided does not give us the right to harm the lands, waters, and marine life. We know every action has a reaction, and the stakes are too high to continue manipulation of sacred life. Please consider the beaches, both land and water and marine life, as beings no different and no less valuable than human life. Please help us to protect the sacred and consider safer and more respectful water options, which would benefit even larger territories. Aweshkoneha, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. It's a joy to hear you on this call. Frankie Orona.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Haku, haumataki ape, wopala wankatanka tukashila. Hello to all my relatives and good day to you all. Thank you to the Great Spirit and Creator for bringing us all together today. I want to start with saying thank you to the original people and spirits of the land we all reside on. My name is Frankie Orona. I'm the Executive Director of Society of Native Nations, which is an intertribal Native American nonprofit organization. I am Borado and Nde from Texas and Tongva and Chumash from California. I'm a member of the community and I'm here to speak as a member of the community. I'm here to say that the original people of the land have an inherent right to protect the land, air, water, and their future generations from all actions that threaten those basic human rights to not just survive, but to thrive with the natural human rights resources that exist today. We do not believe that the Water Board has done enough to include the local tribal communities, not utilizing all its resources to do so, or knowing or accepting that new measures might need to be added to the process of tribal inclusion in these issues and projects. We believe there is a communication problem between the Water Board, state agencies, local city officials, with the local indigenous communities which is a historical problem that never really was addressed seriously, nor do we feel that the inequality in these processes are inclusive of the less represented and under-resourced communities that are directly impacted by the adverse effects of these projects. 57 million gallons a day of toxic brine waste is going to create more damage to our oceans, marine life, land, human health that we will not be able to recover from if we do not address the real issues first. The need for water should not be relied on by desalination. That's not addressing the root of the water crisis we are in today. Expansion additions to a restoration project is not restorative and is more of a cover-up and an illusion tactic on our local communities. When talking about human rights to water, desalination does impact current water resources negatively as it ignores the root of the problem to our water crisis, which is the need to protect water from all for-profit private corporations, such as stopping the bottling of water by corporations for profits when water should not be commodified if water is a human right, especially stopping the allowing of corporations from doing so in times when the state of California is in a water drought restrictions, which we've all seen them continue to do throughout time. It should be illegal for them to do so during these times. We need to heal the water that already exists that we have abused and contaminated. Fixing what we have already done wrong is the answer to our water crisis. Many have forgotten our responsibility as human beings to take care of that which gives us all life. You need to listen to the local communities and include the local indigenous voices. You must work hard to include them. They have been ignored for generations, lied and used negatively in these matters, which will take much effort to heal that wrongdoing so they can feel safe and true sincerity when being asked to be included in these processes. I respectfully request that this project and all decisions for it be postponed till adequate local tribal consultation exists. I truly hope and pray that our youth, like we heard earlier in this conversation, our youth holds us accountable in the future for our actions today. I truly hope that they hold us accountable because this is unnecessary and not needed in these times. We need a healthy, sustainable future for our next generation and many generations after that to come. So prayers for good health and safety during these times. Thank you to each and every one of you.
My name is Lydia Ponce, and I reside on what's known as the unceded Tongva lands in the territory of Venice. I am Mayo and Yoreme and Quechua. I am with the American Indian Movement. And that it must be said again that the ocean is our medicine. All coastal and non-coastal indigenous people go there for special ceremonies, rites of passage, and different things that we need to do with as a tribal nation. Now, we posted this photo of the slide of the entire state of California. I have to say that the site of where Poseidon's desalination plant is being proposed is the traditional land of the Tongva and the Hachiman. And south of that, of Huntington Beach, are the Kumeyaay and so many other tribal nations. All of California proposed desal plants must have tribal consultation, as the California law requires to conduct proper consultation with the local tribes. It cannot be said enough. Best practices call for water board staff to identify any and all tribes that have ancestral territory and current land covering multiple regional board boundaries. And many of the tribal peoples have land that territories that overlap as well. And that communication and consultation should occur as early in the decision-making process as possible before any decision is made. The extent of this so-called 2019 letter for tribal consultation was supposedly received as they were mailed to offices and PO boxes. There were no phone calls, no backup plan, no updates, no emails, no outreach that would lead to meaningful engagement with the tribes in this important decision that impacts their sovereignty, their land, and the water. This is no way to conduct tribal consultation. So can you imagine nations negotiating international treaties this way globally? So, Poseidon is, the public does not owe approval of this permit because of the money that has been spent and the 20 years gone by. Taking a look at this slide, the accumulative impact is just there, blatant and in our eyes. And all of the local indigenous leaders need to be they need to be consulted, informed with prior consent. This needs to happen before the ink dries on the plans. The local indigenous leaders, next slide, have sent letters to the regional board as part of the public comment process. 2 of us met with the staff from the state and regional board earlier this week. We we had said, and I have it written in email, that this was not considered formal consultation. So whoever presented earlier lied, blatantly lied, and their pants are on fire. Somebody go get a fire extinguisher. While they conceded in this meeting that Poseidon failed to do proper consultation from the beginning, they refused to postpone the regional water board meeting today. So this does not mean that this is consultation, even being on this call, as COVID has affected tribes disproportionately, and we cannot be penalized by a board that seems to be trying to accommodate Poseidon to get a permit to pollute. As Frankie mentioned, 57 million gallons of toxic concentrated brine every day, 365 days a year. No words on paper will satisfy the concern and the upset and the ruin of our oceans. This is the wrong direction to respond to climate crisis and global warming. Last slide, please. I want to uplift and amplify what Oscar said about the housing theft funding from the entire state of California, the $2 billion, and the additional $880 million theft from the state of California, as that was supposed to be a federal subsidy from our federal government. To me, this particular project reeks of colonial settler, racial and social gall and audacity, filled proposal with just nothing but greed. And this project is all about corporate profit with public dollars. This, if approved, depletes our access to a healthy ocean and beaches for 7 generations to come. English is a tricky language, and the cross-cultural differences between the people who came on the boats 529 years ago and the language that we speak as Indigenous people, mitigate, feasible, and restoration do not mean the same thing to us. No one asked the Indigenous, so you must deny this project, because this will lead to the toxic beaches and the overflowing toxic brine, and it's not part of our tribal ceremonies, and that is not part of our tribal medicine. Deny the project. It's incomplete. It's not truthful. There is no honor. There is no desalination plant as a response or an answer to our living and our life. No to Poseidon. And I thank you for your time. Let's see if there's any time available for Stan. If he's on the call, it's 3 minutes and 9 seconds, and you're running the clock. Can you please ask for Stan?
We do not have Stan on the attendee list.
Okay, I'm going to ask Frankie or Tina, since they are of the land, if they have any closing words. And I want to thank you for your time and for organizing the 15 minutes, which is ridiculous after 20 years of trying to communicate with the tribal people. It's failure on your part. There any questions from the board?
I do not see any hands up from the board members.
So perhaps we can postpone this until there is formal tribal consultation, or vote no completely and deny the permit. Thank you.